Welcome to session 2, where we'll be talking about the planning phase to help us to get started in video marketing. And this is part 2 of a series of 5 videos that's going to help you to get started on your video marketing. So in today's session, we're going to specifically learn about how we can start to use the strategy that we put together in the last episode. We'll talk in a bit more detail about our formats and how we can perfect them. I'll also pull out some examples of different formats and the way they're being used so that we can analyze the sorts of strategies that underpin the different types of formats, because there are pros and cons for different types of formats, and some of the formats you need something, some of them you can just get going. So we'll highlight just a few examples that should be useful for everyone. Again, we'll go into a bit more detail on the equipment and the specifics of the equipment that relate to the types of videos that you might be thinking about producing, and we'll talk in detail about that, and obviously we can answer any questions as well. And then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of planning a series, and more specifically planning our very first episode. So the idea is that when we've finished this session, we can go away and apply what we've learned, and then we can immediately press record. So we're very, very close to pressing record on our camera. So the planning template is in the same place, and there will be an addition to that that will help us to plan that first episode. Okay, so step 1, let's review our strategy. So in the last session, we said there are a number of things we need to do, but 3 specific questions. So what is your goal? Who is your audience? And what is your theme? So let's come first to Ali and Jordan.
Okay, so the goal of our video marketing is to engage with my marketing or my network more creatively, and to demonstrate what a good interview looks like. So that's my goal. The audience are SME business owners who've got a growth strategy, want to expand their team, want to do it in a structured, professional way, and want to improve their interviewing skills as a result. And what is our theme? I think we kind of touched on that a little bit earlier on, didn't we? The theme is that we're going to demonstrate how to conduct a professional interview, probing the candidate, getting maximum information in the shortest time, and understand the assessing process that goes on in order to make the decisions, to make the right decisions. And our series is going to be snippets of an interview going through to a decision outcome at the end. So it's basically, am I going to hire Jordan?
Right. Okay. So you're the like the target customer, if you like, and Jordan's a potential employee, and you're going to tell the story about how to run the perfect interview, right?
Yes.
Over a series of episodes.
Yes, that's the idea.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And you were mentioning before we started that you've got a particular angle to the way that you're going to record these sorts of episodes. Can you just expand on that a little bit?
Do you want to talk about your commentary idea?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. So you sort of see the interview going on, and then sort of flip over to a commentary studio with a headset and a microphone.
So that will be me. So we're trying to weigh up whether I'm me with a wig on interviewing Jordan, and then I'm a different person, probably Ali Waters, in the commentary box, and then I'm effectively watching somebody that I've trained in interviewing skills interviewing Jordan. So I'm kind of commentating on how they're doing. And I think needs to be a follow-up question here, or I think they can move on now, or I don't know what it's going to be, but the idea is that there will be 3 people in this series of little videos, and at the end we'll have collected lots of information about Jordan and his suitability for a creative marketing assistant role, which is a fictitious role I've just invented, and I want to get the engagement from the audience to help me decide if Jordan is going to be the right hire for me. And after each little session, I'm hoping that we'll have some kind of conversation going on LinkedIn on the way through the sessions, if you like. Does that make sense, or does that sound mad?
No, it makes enormous amounts of sense. I've got to say, I'm just feeling like emotions of pride here. I just think that's really, really good on so many levels. You've got there's a business objective underpinning it, which is obviously create engagement with your network. But you're doing that by helping people to understand what a really good interview looks like. You and I spoke last week during the session about combining like knowledge transfer, which this is, but also being entertaining. And I think you found a way of doing that really effectively, frankly. And like you say, if you can execute it in the way you're talking about, it probably is something you can generate conversations off the back of it. So it's really good. Does anyone else have any sort of thoughts or comments on that strategy?
My only thought process, sorry Sam, the only thought process is that of the professionalism, when you mentioned like wearing a wig and being somebody else. All I was thinking is you could probably still achieve it and not necessarily be in camera shot. So you could do the interview, Ali, and you not be in camera shot when you're doing the interview with Josh. I've got the names right, haven't I?
Jordan.
Jordan, sorry. I was speaking to Josh an hour ago, I'm so sorry. And then you could be the commentator after, because my only worry was with the wig and I know it's the humour, and it sometimes can be a fine line. That was my only.
Yeah, we had talked about that. You're right. Yeah. We don't want to turn it into a slapstick, silly sketch. But it was just trying to differentiate me being the interviewer from me being the commentator. Otherwise, I think we might confuse the audience. But maybe we just need to have my hair up and down, or I don't know.
I think it's a great idea, though. Such a great idea.
I'd really appreciate. I know you'll probably come on to this, Elliott, but we need a really good title for this. If anyone's got any ideas on what we might call this this little series, that would be great.
I think on the title, I think that's probably one for Sam and Maha and Mike, because I'm good at a few things, but coming up with titles and I'm not great at it, in all honesty, although I will give it some thought. For what it's worth, I think Sam raises a really good point there. You do, Sam, and just listening to you speak, but I know through experience that you've got to push the creative boundaries as far as possible, and then you bring them back. So it might be that you try both approaches, and you see what works. But Sam's point is a good point, very well made, and it kind of goes back, I suppose, to the best practice thing about which type of video is it mainly.
I'll tell you what, I will wear the wig I was thinking of in our next session, and you can tell me whether you think it's mad, because I've worn it several times and a lot of people think it's my real hair. I'll wear it next time and see what you think. See if you think it will ruin the effect I'm trying to create or not.
Okay, so let's come to Sam.
Okay, so my goal, I think, having worked with a few sort of maybe old school businesses, they're very good at the sales point element and maybe communicating products, but really over the past 10 years, I've realized they're not necessarily so good at communicating internally as well. They might have some great marketing happening by maybe an agency and internally, but then sort of sales staff, although they're off doing their own thing, and then they don't always feel that they're being communicated within. So my videos is really about, I decided that maybe from that is how you can maximize all of your content. So if you have a marketing agency that's producing work, that how can you use that internally and use it for maybe social media as well? So just maximize my video on maximizing content in more ways than one. And my target audience was sort of SMEs that are maybe between 1 and 10 people in the business that don't necessarily have an in-house marketing team or internal communications, but know that they need to do more to be consistent internally and externally.
Yeah, and Sam, for those who don't know, Sam is as an expert marketeer you've got a lot of experience of working with as a, I suppose, permanent freelance person. Is that
Yes.
fair? And you worked you're really good at working with relatively small companies, and you can pull a lot of things together.
That's right.
I think honestly, this subject, speaking as a digital marketing person who knows about marketing, it's repurposing content and leveraging different initiatives that companies are doing is one of the lowest hanging opportunities that the vast majority of companies don't get into. So as a particular subject area to land the whole theme on, I think it's fantastic, given the way that you're trying to position yourself, and you're clear about your audience. What about the actual theme of the series itself? Have you been able?
I've struggled with that because obviously there's quite a lots of. I was thinking across it could be maximizing your communication, but or maximizing your marketing materials to communicate. But I feel like I'd do in the episodes social media, your website, so really have the consistency across the board. But I haven't got one specific theme as such, but it's maximizing your content.
So when we get on in a moment to looking at some of the format strategies, I think my feeling is that's where you should go and do some thinking after this session or whenever you want that, because it's brilliant. You've got your goal down, you've got your audience down, you know what you want to talk about. Finding the format, it's actually it's not an easy thing to do, but it's really, really important that you do that before you jump into recording. Any thoughts from anyone else? Okay, so let's come to Mike.
Yeah, so thanks, Elliot. So in terms of goal, well, there's a couple of objectives really. One is, I mean, obviously we're starting a new venture, so we really need to create, in an interesting and different market, different environment. We need something that's kind of distinctive to both, want to reach our audience, but also want to be distinctive, but also create trust, because it's all about the person that you're going to be, coached by or learning from. So, putting pictures out on LinkedIn is one way of doing it, but actually, so helping people to get to know me and my affiliates or my associates, this is the way to get them out there. Also, as part of the service that we'll be offering, we want to build up digital video content so we can place on Udemy and our own website that people can pay for and download. So it's those two angles. So one is to introduce ourselves and build up a relationship with our prospective audience, and then the other side of it is build up some skills to go and put together not just a traditional voiceover type training, but actually, do pieces to camera, etc. I'm not sure if I'll be wearing a wig, but I'll go for this. That's my goal. It's twofold. Who's our audience? So ultimately, the people who will be attending our courses. They're our audience, and we've got a couple of personas around those. But also recognise that we need to sell into the corporate market. People are going to pay for this. So the people we want to see this are those heads of project and program management, heads of change within can be larger enterprises, but actually we want to be talking to some of the business owners who are investing a lot of money, have risky projects, and want to ensure that their project and program managers are given the best possible coaching, which I'll come back to later, which you'd only get if you go and hire some pretty expensive people on very expensive day rates. So we want to go and hit those two different audiences. In terms of our personas, I mean, I've listed a couple of our target audience. So who would we be actually targeting to come on our courses? One group would be basically the group have one common trait, which is they're transitioning into either project management or they're transitioning from project into program management. So capturing would help them, transition successfully or in the early stages of their project or program management career, and build upon their formal training. In terms of the theme, it's the next one I think is. Effectively, our business is about accelerating not just the person, but also their projects. All right, so there's another element to the business where we can actually intervene or support given projects or programs. But we want to basically show them how they can accelerate their projects and also accelerate their career. That's our theme. In terms of the actual content we like to create initially, again, before I get into the trying to make a 90-minute video of how to do X, Y, Z for your project, I was thinking about doing 1 minute, 1 to 2 minute, ideally weekly, topic of the week, hot topics of the week, and try and make it again topical rather than run through a series of today we're going to talk about stakeholder management, tomorrow we're going to talk about building Gantt chart. Try and make it topical, but actually bring it back to something they'll learn on the course, but just keep it really tight within 60 to 120 seconds. So that's the first content we really want to create. Okay, so thoughts about that?
Thanks, Mike. So look, what my thoughts are, you're clear about what you're doing, which is fantastic, and a lot of what you are saying there is really, really relevant for a wider marketing strategy where you've got a number of objectives and a number of different audience groups. If you're the way to fill out, or you can do it, the whole point about this course is giving you information and you take it away and make it work how you want. But my suggestion would be that you've packed a lot in there, and for one video series, you need to have a very specific goal for that series and a very specific audience, and the answer to all of the other questions, the platform, the format, and so on. And so it sounds to me like you've got a number of different series of types of video in there, as I'm sure you probably know.
Bring it back down. Yeah. No. Okay. So no, that's fair enough. Okay. So I'll take a look at the template again, and I'll refill it in with the effectively looking at the teaser trailer, the weekly hot take theme. Okay.
I think you're spot on. I think that's the way to do it, because it sounds to me like you're going to have in the end at some point a series of courses, and in a sense, those video courses, that's actually your product more than a piece of a marketing asset.
Exactly.
And it's like the mini things are the marketing assets, which is probably more relevant for for this particular series. The wider everything you're saying is utterly relevant for growing your business in a wider sense. So it's great.
No, I just wanted to share kind of the bigger picture, but actually I'll take a look at the template again and I'll just narrow it down to the teaser trailers. Got it. Thank you, Elliot. Really appreciate that.
Pleasure. Let's push on then. So we've reviewed our strategy and we've got a pretty clear idea about what our goal is, who our audience is, and what our theme for our series of marketing videos is going to be. So then we will move on to a next step, which is really nailing down our format. So the thing about the format thing is, as it sort of says in brackets there, you will need to experiment, because it's almost certainly the case, and we were just talking about that when we were talking about some of the ideas that you guys are having. It's almost certainly the case that what you start off doing will have to be adapted as you go into it, and that's good and it's normal, because how can you possibly just imagine the perfect series and immediately bring it into existence? In the real world, and certainly in the world of marketing, you will need to experiment. But having said that, if we can set off in a direction that is that's based on a well thought out idea, based on where we're positioned, what our strategy is, i.e. what we're trying to do, and we've picked a format that is going to help us to make that journey, then we're more likely to succeed quicker than if we didn't choose the right format. So one of the things that I think is really interesting to think about when you're thinking about a format is the fact that most video, if we're going to use video as a medium to get a message across, really it's storytelling. That's what it is. And that goes for, you know, business type of video, but it also obviously goes for entertaining type video. Storytelling is what humans are hardwired to engage with. And so my 8-year-old daughter is doing her homeschooling at the moment, and in English they're teaching her about the 5 W's of a story. So when you're writing a story, you need to write down who are the characters, you know, why are they doing what they're doing, when did it happen, what are they doing, what's happening, and where. You kind of need to have those things defined. And then when you apply this 5 W's to the business world, and this is coming from my wife, who's better at this stuff than I, you have to add the H, and so the H is the how. And so if you're trying to use it to sort of impart knowledge, which is very often what we're trying to do in business, and most of the examples we just gave, we're going to be doing that. In fact, all of the examples. So adding the how is an important next step. So we spoke last week about the formats, and you know, here are some of them, but actually, you know, the list is much bigger than this. And of course, you can blend formats as well to have your own take on them. So let's sort of dive into a couple that might be relevant. Sort of tried to pick ones that might be relevant for people here. So one of them, the first one is vlogs. So you know, this is the take on blog, and it just means video log. And so the thing about these types of videos, and we'll show you an example in just a moment, is that it's typically based around the character. It can be based around the business, but if it is a business, it's probably, you know, a handful of people rather than a very large amount of people. And the reason for that is that these types of videos work well if the audience can have some sort of connection with a person. And the idea being in marketing, yeah, it's broadly true that most people will connect with other people rather than, you know, an organization or even a brand even. So, you know, off-piste slightly, but just to make the point, someone like a brand like Nike might have tens of millions of followers on Instagram. You know, Kim Kardashian will have tens of millions of followers on Instagram, but influencers will engage their audience to a greater extent than even the most famous and influential brands. So brands versus person, the person normally wins out, which is why if you can make your marketing resonate, you know, about people, it's, you know, it very often works. But particularly with this type of format, particularly with the vlogs, there are video formats that don't involve people, and they work, and they can work very well. But if we're going to do a vlog, it probably is about a person or a couple of people at most. So it will be about an ambassador. and if we're using it in a marketing context, it's obviously that ambassador needs to be very sticky to our organization, and they need to obviously represent our organization very, very closely. It's a personal opinion, but in my view, most organizations should be making much more use of their people, not just for vlogs, but in a broader sense to act as the face of the business. And the way it works is if you get these video logs right, then they build this thing called the know, like, and trust factor. So as your audience come to know the characters in the vlogs, at some point they may come to like them. And then the thing about sales is, you know, and I'm sure Sam will know this, and Maha, and you know, and Ali and Mike, you probably all know this, but the thing about sales is people won't buy from you unless they trust you. So it's kind of representative of this final thing. So you're building up the know and the like, and you know, if you do it really well, you're building up some trust there as well. So this strategy, the thing about it is it's much easier to deploy this strategy if you've got someone who kind of already has influence, or already has a network. It's why kind of influencers work. Look, this Gary V, I don't know if you've sort of heard of him or not, but he's created a very large following, certainly in the US and to some extent in Europe, from entrepreneurs. So he will speak about entrepreneurship. He's run various businesses, including a large media agency, and he's been vlogging his life for probably about 6 years. I say he and his business. So he now has a team of people who follow him around filming, and it was for many years it was called the Daily V. His name's Gary Vaynerchuk, so he goes by this VEE. And it was really, really, really effective at just creating a huge amount of awareness about him as a thought leader on the subject of entrepreneurship in a broader sense. And you know, over time it's created engagement. He has a really strong profile. So he is like a one-person leads generator for a lot of his organizations. So it works really effectively. It's, you know, more recently they changed it to the weekly V, and actually since the lockdown it's become him live streaming from his home, because he no longer has his film crew that can sort of follow him around. But that's an example. He's an example of a vlogger, you know, and he's pretty successful. The other one I want to speak about, you know, and this is probably a bit more obvious, you know, if any makeup brand out there, virtually every single makeup brand, they will create tutorials about how to do makeup. And it's kind of an obvious strategy, but it's also, you know, a really sensible one. If you've got a product like that, where the product is a piece of makeup, but what people are actually buying is the look. So the consumers buy what the product's able to give them. So they're selling the look, therefore they market the look. You know, and this is Maybelline, but all of them will do this. And you know, what they'll oftentimes do is have a series of videos that talk about, you know, how to do eyes, and another series that talk about how to do foundation. So it's kind of an obvious strategy. They might have, some of them have another series where they invite a celebrity influencer to come in and you know, and give their take on makeup. And so this is an example of a how-to video that's, you know, it really fits in with their marketing strategy, because they're selling the look, but it also it enables them to go for what makeup brands would consider their most important target audience, not necessarily the most valuable, but the most important from a marketing perspective is actually younger people, younger women mostly, who are coming into the phase of buying makeup. And so if these brands can reach those people with tutorial videos that help them to learn how to do it themselves, then they would stand a chance of bringing that consumer, you know, within their sphere of influence, which allows them to retain them as a customer, they would hope, for many, many years and decades. And so that's an example of how-to videos. Another example that I think is going to be relevant to a couple of people here is this Q&A thing. So I've picked out a slightly different company here.
In today's episode, you'll learn how long your podcast episodes should be. Welcome to Podcasting Q&A, where you learn the best tips and strategies to grow, launch, and monetize your podcast. This week's question comes from Brandon.
Hi, Buzzsprout. My name's Brandon. I'm the host of Digital Marketing Tool Talk. My episodes are usually about 8.
So this is Buzzsprout. They're a podcasting software sort of platform, a podcasting hosting company. They're not a huge one. You know, they've got 24K. They're not a huge company basically. They're quite a small company. But what they've done is create. They've got different series of videos. They've sort of got instructional videos talking about how to do podcasting, but they've also more recently created this Q&A series that I thought was really relevant. So because they're a software and hosting company, they get a lot of support questions come in. And so what they do is they pick out some of the most relevant questions, and then they've started building their weekly videos, Q&A videos, by answering those persons' questions. And then more recently, they've had this format where the person will go to a page on their website and make a little recording of their question, an audio recording, and then submit that question. And then so they're able to then bring that question to life, which involves their audience, but also kind of it helps them. And I know what they're doing here, because they actually created a video where they talked about what the strategy was, which was really interesting. And they said that when they were talking about the issues based on their own subjective understanding of what their customers' issues were, it wasn't effective as if they just garnered the questions from the customers themselves. So it's a really good example of, almost it's a hybrid of Q&A, interview, if you like. Almost, it's not an interview, but it's answering someone's question, and it's audience participation. So the objective there, the objective with this particular type of video and Q&A videos in general, I guess, is to garner questions from your audience and industry. You can create videos, episodes where you answer those questions. You can base an episode around a question or a couple of questions. You need the platform so that you can capture the questions, or you need some way of capturing them. But then the beauty is that you can involve your audience directly, which is actually what, oftentimes you're trying to do with the video. So if you are trying to do that, for that reason, it works very well. And then, the other one, I mean, obviously this is a large brand and they've got plenty of budget, but I thought it's worth picking out.
Elliott, just a quickie on the Q&As. Just around this, a bit of a what's the word I'm looking for? A morality type question. When you do the Q&As, do they always have initial questions, or is it okay to start off with, "Hi, I've got 5 questions in from my thousands of followers," having no followers and no questions? I mean, what's the morality of that one? Or as long as you get away with it.
No, look, it's a good question. I think, look, if you're in business, or even if you're starting up and you're taking some experience from something you've been doing elsewhere, like you will know what your customers' pain points are, Mike. Even if they haven't asked you directly, you will know, because I know that you've worked in that industry, in and around that industry, and you would have had those questions come into you. So I would suggest that it's not really a moral issue. I think it's about in video. We said it last time. It's really, really important to be like transparent in general. It's a bit cliche, but it really is important. Yeah. Because if you don't get that bit right, people will sense it. So I think it's okay to say, "I've got a question here. It comes from," and you can put a random name on it. That's perfectly reasonable. That's not being immoral. That's just putting a name to a question. It's a real question.
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of those, you just walk the line, really.
Yeah, no, I understand. No, I just thought I'd just pop that one out there. Thank you.
It is a really good, it's definitely a good question, Mike. It really is, because I think it's a question that lots of people would have.
It comes back to authenticity, doesn't it? I think that's your key point there, isn't it? It's being authentic. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah,
Elliot, sorry. I was thinking on that line, maybe you could, from working in, say, like PR as well, when I would work out a PR strategy for a company, I'd get them to focus on 3 key messages for the whole year, so that they're focused, they come up with the 3 points that they want to communicate. And so you could hook your questions into that. It doesn't have, like Elliot said, I don't feel you have to say it's from someone, but you could say from your experience, you get asked this question a lot, or, but hook it round your 3 key points. I don't know.
Thanks, Sam. That's really good. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Sam. And I think it's key, because you've got a theme for your series, but you've also got a theme for your episode, which is what we're going to sort of talk about in a moment. And obviously you need to pick a question that connects with what you're trying to communicate. Okay, so look, this is the Financial Times, their YouTube channel, and this is a playlist where they run a series of interviews. They're getting the big hitters, and it speaks for itself. But what I wanted to say here, if you look at the views, so their typical views for a typical video will be a couple of thousand, sometimes they're in the tens of thousands, so 12,000 is about average. As soon as you bring Bill Gates on the scene, the number of views goes up by more than 10 times, and that's because obviously it's a really big profile. The reach and awareness goes very wide, and so Sam will know better than I. PR people, they will know that celebrity sells. So we don't all have access to Bill Gates, obviously, but if we do have access to influential people and we can include them in what we're doing, because they're more likely to share that content because they've been involved in it. It is a tactic that people can be quite shy about sort of doing it, but if you can kind of, particularly once you've got your series going, your episodes going, you're a bit more confident about recording, trying to engage people who have influence within your industry is a really, really good idea. Someone said it to me once, and it's really, really true, because MintTwist, we started running a podcast, creating a podcast last year, and it's like, you can approach a guest and ask them to be a guest on your podcast. They'll probably say yes, they'll probably come on your podcast, and they'll probably share that content with their network. If you ask them for a meeting to talk about their digital marketing, they almost certainly won't answer that email. And so it can be used, the interview videos and podcast videos can be used as a tactic to create connections. I'd hasten to add, you still got to do it, you still got to be genuine, it's still got to be authentic. It's not just want an interview so I can sell you something, but it's a nice sort of angle to it, and it's what a lot of people are doing. Okay, so I'll just go around and check in. So that's format. Sam, should we come to you?
Yeah, I think I'm leaning towards the vlog. Obviously, I'd love a camera crew to follow me around, but I just need more one-to-one from my home, or I'll try not to mismatch my jumper to my wallpaper and be a bit more when I do I think me onto the camera and thinking, talking out loud, a little bit like you and you're walking across the field, as long as I can edit that, because as you know I can ramble, but I think that will be my way forward.
Yeah, Sam, if I may say so, I think you've got a wonderful camera presence. I love your jumpers. I think you'd be great doing vlogs.
Okay, thank you.
And it's a good way. I still think we're going to go on to talk about it now. A bit of structure about how you open and middle and close, and possibly if you can come up with something that's a bit unique, different in the way that Ali and Jordan have come up.
Yeah.
It would be a good way to differentiate and get it going, but I'm sure you'll come up with something. Okay, Maha?
I would definitely go with the blog as well, because I think that kind of creates, I think you can relate to the other person once you're being yourself. So yeah, I think it just creates more of an interpersonal connection if you have a blog.
And Elliot, do they make hybrid vlog / Q&A? You know, is that a thing, or is that just bad practice?
No, no. It's a good question. I think I was looking when I was putting this stuff together. I was looking again at Gary V. I've been following his videos for quite a while. His series, The Daily V, in the end became a mashup of, he had different guests, and sometimes it was Q&A, and sometimes it was him just rambling to the camera. As much as I think, you know, a lot of what he's done is amazing, you know, I have a lot of respect to the guy, I do think his format went off piste. And I suppose my answer to your question is, I would suggest that it's better to kind of have a format and kind of stick with it.
Yeah.
You know, if you're Beyonce or you're Kim Kardashian, you can just do what you want, can't you? I mean, but if we're doing it for sort of marketing purposes, then a format is a good idea, in my opinion.
Yep. Okay.
And sorry, Elliot, does that come also back to the trust, like the consistency and trust? So if you pick them, people know, you know, people don't always like change. So if you're doing that consistently, that will help. You know, build up the trust part. Sorry.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Consistency will, you know, it increases trust, and it probably locks in the engagement that you've built up. You know, it's not to say, I think the way to think about it is this: you start off with a format, you make it work, and once you've got enough data to say, I think I should change that bit a little bit, or I think I should do this differently, then you obviously move in that direction. So I look at the stuff that I've done personally and with MintTwist critically. I can see loads of mistakes that we've made, and we won't make them again, like nothing disastrous, but just things that could be better. And so you will definitely evolve your format rather than just randomly chop it from one week to the next. That's my feeling. Look, Maha, just going back on what you were saying, I think, you know, for any person, young person, whatever person you are, if you're starting a business in today's day and age, and it's a startup business, and you're comfortable being the ambassador for your business, you know, this goes for actually everyone on this call, Mike, Ali, Maha, you know, Sam, it's all of us, it's me as well. I think being an ambassador for your business if you're comfortable doing it, it can potentially be a really powerful thing, because again, Sam was just saying, it's as our audience comes to know us, they're going to more likely, hopefully, like us and at some stage trust us. And video is just really powerful at doing that. So, you know, particularly if it's a startup business, building out some vlogging type content that's talking about the story of your business, to the extent that you can do that, you know, I think is a good idea.
Yeah, actually, so basically my business idea is a skincare brand. And so like a few months ago, I was just thinking about, you know, if I were to have a brand ambassador, who would I choose? Would it be like very far-fetched, but celebrity level, or like a blogger level, influencer level? And then I'm just thinking that when I watch bloggers, or celebrities or whatever talk about their skincare regime, for me, I don't think that I can personally relate to them much, because either their lives are very different from mine, their schedule's different from mine, the kind of money they have to spend on skincare products is very different from me. I can relate to people who are, you know, middle class like me. And so I was just like, but I'm middle class like me, so why can't I represent my brand? And so I spoke to a few people about it, and they said, yeah, we'd rather watch our friends or people like us give us skincare advice rather than celebrities, because we just can't relate to celebrities. So I'm still trying to come up with it, but with the layered approach that I have with like the kind of videos that I would want to make, the reviews, some of them can come from influencers, but most of them, I would want my reviews to be from normal people like us, so that it's a lot more relatable, and I think it'll just leave a lot more of an impact in terms of the brand message I'm trying to give out. So yeah, I think maybe like moving on in the sessions, I'd be more like well-rounded enough to like discuss the whole goal and theme, because right now I have it like scribbled over everywhere. I'm just all over the place. But yeah, no, I completely agree with you.
I think it's a really good idea, Maha. And look, you and I, you were in the evening course with me. So we had 8 weeks, or was it 10 weeks? I think 10 weeks. So I've seen Maha in action, and you can definitely do it because I've seen you in those groups with the other participants. And I think what you're saying about involving like real customers is also a really good idea. And there could be something in there, Q&A type, answering customer questions, or bringing in their ideas, or something that could work alongside the vlog.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought what we'll do is talk in a little bit more detail about equipment, and I've split this up into like a mobile environment, a kind of studio type environment, and a desktop environment. Because if we're running a tutorial video like this, it's a desktop environment. If we've, possibly when Ali and Jordan are, they might have a sort of a more, it will be in your house, but it will be a studio setup. If you're doing the vlogs when you're walking around fields or, on the move, then, it needs to be a mobile setup. So I'll talk about the equipment that you need, and sort of advice that I can give for the 3 types of setup, because the types of videos that I run for myself and with MintTwist and with clients, I've seen all 3 setups. So first of all, as we've said, if you've got, particularly if it's a relatively new smartphone camera, the camera will be brilliant. And if you're out and about, then, it makes sense to look at your smartphone. Now, this picture here, you'll see the chap, he's got, wireless AirPods. And if all of those types of devices, they will act as the headphone, but they'll also act as the microphone. And so when I walk around doing my selfie videos, I'm basically holding up the iPhone, and most of them I've got my AirPods in, and they're excellent because the sound quality is very good, and the noise, the background noise, is minimized. There were a couple of I think there were 2 in the series early on where I think I might have had my AirPods in, but they weren't connected via Bluetooth, and the background noise from just wind and passing cars is just so much higher, and it really degrades obviously the audio, but it has an unnecessarily negative impact of the quality of the whole video. I think, let me just stress that I think video marketing, particularly at the moment, it can be rough and ready, and it doesn't need to be perfect. But if we can improve our audio, a lot with just a simple sort of thing, why wouldn't we do that? So you can also use like wired, headset. Obviously you can, but it's up to you. I think an investment in wireless headphones and mic, they all are headphones and mic. It kind of makes sense. Now, if you're going mobile, but you want to interview 2 people, so if you're out and about and you're running an interview style, then you will need an actual microphone, because you can't, or at least it's you would need a significantly large amount of extra software and hardware to take with you if you wanted to capture 2 audio tracks. So if you can't have 2 people with 2 sets of headsets, wireless or otherwise, and effectively capture the audio on the go, you would need to bring a laptop with you, and you would need to have some extra processing software. So in that scenario, you need a microphone like this one you can see, hopefully I'm circling here, that you can plug in to a smartphone, and this microphone would significantly improve the audio capture of 2 people talking, a meter away from the phone, than trying to use the onboard mic of a smartphone. So the onboard camera of a smartphone is excellent, but the onboard microphone of a smartphone, although it's very, very good if you're close to it when you're speaking, if you're trying to capture some video and associated audio, and there's 2 people and they're a meter away, it will fall away very quickly in terms of quality. And then, some sort of tripods. You've got these, you might have seen them, you've got these flexible tripods. They're called octopus ones, I think, and you can kind of wrap them around a tree. So you can like hang, so if you're out and about in nature, you can steady your picture against, you know, almost anything, or you can use a selfie stick or something like that. So that's the sort of mobile setup. You know, when we talk about microphone, you know, if you spend £40 on a microphone, it will be, you know, much higher quality than the onboard microphone for a smartphone. So if you're going in studio, you know, you can invest. So MintTwist bought a Lumix G50 Panasonic for about £600, and that's like, you know, a very high-end camera. So what you're buying there is just increased resolution, you know, loads more settings, and we use that for taking video in the office, like when we make videos in the office of our people and mint tips and things like that. And it allows you to achieve obviously a greater quality, but it also, if you're going to do editing and start cropping in, you can crop into a small section of video and the quality will still be exceptional. If you try to do that with low quality video, it becomes really granular. So I guess the point is, if you are going to spend £500 or £600, you can get an exceptionally high quality camera. When I went to buy the camera, I sort of, you know, learning about this stuff as I was, spoke to the salesperson there, and effectively the next camera up, which was about, you know, £900 or something, my understanding is that once you spend that amount of money, you're basically at Hollywood, literally Hollywood production level camera. So the good news is that the best cameras in the world, because of technology improvements and so on and so forth, they've just come down so much in price. If you're spending, you know, £500, you are getting essentially a state-of-the-art camera. But do remember, the best smartphones are not too far behind this. They're not far at all. So you don't, in my opinion, you don't need this camera. The smartphone is excellent to get going with. If you are going to get a camera like that, just because, you know, if you're spending £500, you may as well spend £50 and get the proper tripod. A green screen, you know, when we speak about editing in week 4, it's actually very, very easy to overlay backgrounds in the way that, you know, Zoom builds it into its software, but actually we can overlay backgrounds to our video when we edit them as well. And if you have a green screen like this, and you can buy something like this on Amazon for, you know, £40 or £30, it's not too much money. The benefit is then you can just project a background onto that. And we'll cover that when we talk about editing. It's very easy to do. And then if you've got a sort of desk setup environment, you will need the laptop for recording, some form of webcam. It can be the built-in camera on your laptop if you've got one, or it can be an external webcam. There is some software that you can use to connect your smartphone to a computer and use the smartphone video, which will probably be better than most onboard laptop videos. I'll cover that when we talk about the editing session, because it's not entirely straightforward. It's better if you've got a good webcam. It's easier, let's say. If you're, you know, the microphone, if you're going to be, you know, doing a lot of this, it is potentially worth looking at a desktop microphone that would capture superior audio, particularly if you're turning it into podcasts. So what a lot of people are doing with video is turning it into podcasts. And if you're doing that, obviously in podcast environment, the audio is even more important. Plugging in headphones, you know, it just minimizes feedback. And then, you know, if it's, you know, we're recording this on Zoom, there are lots of other pieces of software where you can record interview style bits of video, and obviously there's screen recorders for recording, you know, tutorials if you just want to do them by yourself. Move on, because I'm conscious of time, and then we'll come to some questions after this section. So remember, just to recap, we said that a series of video is a collection of episodes that ideally are going to touch on something that's relevant, to our target audience. And if we're reaching marketing managers, yes, marketing might be important to them, but lots of other things will be as well. And then a point on schedule. And what we mean by this is how many videos are we going to release on a weekly basis or a monthly basis or a bi-monthly basis. So the thing to say here is that planning, producing, editing, launching, and marketing a video, you know, we're going through this series, but once you actually start doing it, it takes a lot of time. So it can be a full-time job, but for most of us, obviously me included, it's something we're fitting in. So if it is that latter, you've got to formulate a schedule that works for you. And I would say, don't be over ambitious, particularly early on. It's better to post regularly and consistency, you know, as we and Sam and others we've been saying today and last session, it's better to be consistent than to be sporadic, because it kind of defeats the object. And then again, you know, Sam's business proposition is right. You know, if we're going to that effort to create that content, how can we repurpose it? And I think Mike was touching on this as well. If we've got some educational video, can we chop it up? And thinking about that in advance of recording is kind of important, because it might impact the way that we structure our episode. Hopefully that makes sense. And so, you know, and the next stage in the sort of the planning process, I guess, is actually writing down your theme, meaning the episode theme, not just, we've been speaking about the theme of the series, now the theme of the individual episode, you know, the title of that episode, and the people that are going to be involved in it. And you know, for some of it, it's just one, but for others, we might need to get people organized. So once you've planned your first episode, or once you've planned top level your series, you can really jump in now and plan your first episode. So I'll just go through these last few slides, and then we'll go around and capture some feedback on these last few sections. So recap from last week, we said there's segments of a video, and we might be using some of these, we might be using all of these, but whatever segments we are using, for each episode, we want to take those segments and then write down 3 things for each of those segments. We want to know how long the segment is going to last, you know, who is the audience seeing and or hearing and or feeling, depending on what we're trying to do with that segment. We want to describe what's going to happen. And then we want to actually potentially draft the content. So what are we actually going to say and do? And so when we talk about content, it's quite easy to sort of jump in and just start talking about a script. So the question, it sort of raises the question, do you need a script, ? And the answer is, for me, the answer is yes, you do need a script, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a verbatim script. So think, when we talk about script in the context of video or podcasting, think about it as being a point on a line between verbatim, where I'm going to write down every single word I'm going to say, and I'm going to say it exactly that way, to a kind of, on the other end of the spectrum, it's a bullet point guide about where I'm going to go. And I would say the bullet point guide is the minimum, because if you don't have that, there's a danger that you just kind of meander off, and you might get the right content, but it makes editing so much harder. So if you've got a kind of at least a guide, then it will be, it will be very helpful. And then we're here now. You know, we've got everything we need to do. We can create our first episode plan. So we've got our video intro segment. It's going to last 5 seconds. It's me at a desk saying, in this video, you're going to learn X. Notes to myself are, you know, be snappy, just get to the point. Then you've got your branded intro, then you've got your early call to action, then you've got your middle, and so on and so forth. And so an episode plan will look like a document, you know, that looks like this. And so what have we learned in this episode? So, you know, so we've learned how we use our strategy from the first session. We've talked about the importance of really nailing down our format, because you know, we need to do that because it's underpinning the structure of our episode, which is underpinning what we're actually going to record. We've spoken a bit more in a bit more detail about the sorts of equipment we need, which will be dependent on the format and where and when and how we're going to be filming. And then we've talked about that it's worth planning out, you know, your first 5 episodes, so have an idea about where you're going. And once you've done that, you can go into more detail on your first episode, and then we're ready to press record. So in the next session, that's exactly what we'll be doing.